So we'll discuss a little bit about the Indian of Yom Tov Sheini. We all know the Gemara in Beya and the Abdallah Beis 4b quotes Abaye, who explains that the practice began when of an additional day of Yom Tov for people who lived in Chutz La'aretz, when they used to establish a new moon based on eyewitness accounts. Even though today we know that we have the calendar, it still retains us. And all of us who live in Golis, all of us who live outside of Eretz Yisrael, are familiar with Yom Tov Sheini. We add on an extra day on Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos. So the interesting discussion in the Gemara in Beya, Machlokes Rav and Rav Asi, in terms of the nature of the 2 days. Is Yom Tov Sheini a total separate day? 2 distinct days? They discuss Kedusha Achas, Shtei Kedushas. Is it 2 distinct days? Or is it one elongated day? Is it one long day? In fact, the opinion of Rav is that it's 2 distinct days. And the opinion of Rav Asi is it's one long day, kind of like we have by the expression by Rosh Hashanah, Yom Ha'arichta. Ma'inaf Kamina, the Gemara asks, what's the practical difference if I say it's 2 distinct days or one long day? So Gemara says the nafkamina would be to make Havdalah. If it's 2 separate days, so then you'd have to make Havdalah in between Yom Tov Rishon and Yom Tov Sheini, because Yom Tov Sheini is a lower level of Kedusha, it's only D'Rabbanan. But if it's one long day, so then there's no separation between the days, Pi Halach, and therefore there would be no need for Havdalah. There's a whole discussion in general whether Havdalah is a mitzvah min Torah or a mitzvah midrabanan. The Rambam's opinion is that Havdalah is a mitzvah min Torah. It's learned out from the same source as Kiddush, Zachar Shom HaShabbos L'Kodsho, to remember the Shabbos day and sanctify it. It's bookends. We remember it on its entrance and exit. And other Rishonim say that Havdalah is only D'Rabbanan. It's a major discussion. And there's a further discussion whether Havdalah and Yom Tov is D'Oraisa D'Rabbanan. But either way, whether it's D'Oraisa D'Rabbanan, that's what the Gemara says. The nafkamina is, if we assume it's 2 distinct days, we have to make Havdalah in between. But if it's one long day, Yom Ha'arichta, we wouldn't have to make Havdalah. So the Rashba points out that even though we paskin, like Rav, that it's 2 distinct days, nevertheless, as you're wondering, we don't make Havdalah in between Yom Tov Rishon and Yom Tov Sheini. And that's because the Rashba says, Al Zilzul Yom Tov Sheini. That if we make it doesn't look right, that people are going to trample on and not give it the proper respect Yom Tov Sheini. In order not to mezalzo in it, so therefore we don't want to make a Havdalah. We don't make a formal Havdalah between Yom Tov Rishon and Yom Tov Sheini. We have this concept of Zilzul also. There's a famous Baal Amor, as well as we started counting Sfira. The famous question of the Baal Amor is, since we keep Yom Tov Sheini Shagolius, so why not when we count Sfira Omer, every night we should count 2 days. Tonight is day 8, tonight is day 9, 7 and 8, 8 and 9, 10 and 11. Why don't we count 2 days misafik? So there's a famous answer of the Dvar Avram that by definition that's not a count. You have to know exactly, you have to be certain of the day. But the Baal Amor gives a different answer. He said, you know why? Really we should count 2 days. But the problem is when we get to the last day, it's going to be a zilzul of the Yom Tov Shavuos. And then Shavuos is D'Oraisa, but the same concept that we don't want to be counting Sfiras or Omer while we are celebrating Shavuos. Similarly, we don't want to be making Havdalah on Yom Tov Sheini, so it's a zilzul. So, luckily Paskin, it's 2 distinct days, but nevertheless we don't make Havdalah because we don't want to cause the zilzul to Yom Tov Sheini. So, what is this issue at hand? What's the issue between the Machlokes Rav and Ravasi. So Ravasi seems to learn that the nature of Yom Tov Sheini is a takana d'Rabbanan. It's a takana d'Rabbanan, and therefore they view it as one long day. And Rav either could hold it's a takana d'Rabbanan, but they didn't make that type of distinction. Or you could say Pshuta, the Rav holds it's a minhag, that since today, we're only counting, we know the real dates. So Yom Tov Sheini Shagolit today is only a minhag. It's minhag I will say in b'yodechem, and therefore that's the issue. Ravasi and Rav, or whether you consider it takana d'Rabbanan or you consider it a minhag. So interesting, this issue whether it's a takana d'Rabbanan or a minhag, there seems to be a machlokes in the Rishonim between Rabbeinu Tam and the Ran. Rabbeinu Tam in Sukkah, Mem Daled Amud Beis, he says Yom Tov Sheini is only a minhag, and the Ran in Sukkah and Chav Beis Amud Aleph writes that Yom Tov Sheini is a takana d'Rabbanan, is a rabbinical decree. And in fact, the Ran asks on Rabbeinu Tam, how could you say Yom Tov Sheini is a minhag? Yeah, we make a bracha on Yom Tov Sheini. We make a bracha, he says, on the matzah. We make a bracha on many things on Yom Tov Sheini. And the Ran is assuming, we know we make brachas on mitzvahs min HaTorah, as we all know. And the Gemara tells us in Psachim, Dav Zayin, we usually make the brachas over L'asiyason. We make the brachas first before we do the mitzvah. And of course, the exception to the rule is the bracha by a ger. Since a ger is a gavra lo chazi, since a ger cannot make the bracha before he or she enters the mikvah because they're not Jewish yet, so that's an exception to the rule that you make the bracha afterwards. That's the famous Chasam Sofer, why on Pesach night we make the bracha Asher Galanu at the end of the Magid. That normally we make a bracha of Sipor Yitzir Zayim in the beginning, but he compares it to a ger. He says, since Chayav Adam Leros is Atzmo Kilu Yatzom Mitzrayim, so we can't make the bracha until we're free, so we wait till Asher Galanu. But clearly we know we make brachas on mitzvahs d'oraisa, as well as we make brachas on mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. How do we know? It's the Gemara in Shabbos, V'heichan Sivanu. But we say Asher Kedishanav Mitzvah B'Tzivanu, we're making a bracha that God commanded us. God didn't command us, the Chachamim did, so that's what the Gemara tells us, based on Lo Sasor, V'Shal Avicho Yadecha, different psukim, the Gemara learns out. It's a machlokes famous discussion, Rambam and Ramban. But we learn out from the Gemara, V'Heichan Tivano, by the Sugya of Chanukah, in the second parak of Masechah Shabbos, that since the Torah gave the Chachamim the power, so therefore we could say V'Tzivano. So that's on mitzvahs d'oraisa, and that's on mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. It's a major shaila. You could say V'Tzivanu on a minhag. That's the famous. On one hand, we see Yom Tov Sheini, we do make a bracha. On the other hand, on Hoshana, that's in fact, that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says in Sukkah, there's a machlokes in the Gemara whether Chibur Arava, when we hit the Aravas and Hoshana Rabbah, whether it's a minhag or a takana d'Rabbanan, my nafkamina, the Gemara seems to say, according to some, whether you make a bracha. If it's a takana d'Rabbanan, you make a bracha. If it's a minhag, you don't. So if you assume like that, so then everyone agrees on Arava, you don't make Chibur Arava, you don't make a bracha. Everyone agrees on Yom Tov Sheini, you do make a bracha. The machlokes is regarding Chatzi Halel on Rosh Chodesh. So the minhag of the Sfardim is, Sfardim have different minhagim. The minhag of the Sfardim is not to make a bracha on Halal and Rosh Chodesh, and the minhag of Ashkenaz is. So we see it's a machlokes Rishonim whether you make a bracha on a minhag. In fact, that seems to be a machlokes Rishonim as well on Chol Hamoed Pesach. The Rambam seems to say that Yom Tov Sheini, the Chatzi Halel, we have on the rest of Pesach, that seems to be also only a minhag. Like Chatzi Halel on Rosh Chodesh. And other regions I'm saying no, it's different. That's a Takana D'Rabbanan. The Halel we say on the rest of Pesach, the Chatzi Halel. By Nafkamina, whether you can make a bracha now. But that's the Ran's attack on Rabbeinu Tam, that we don't make, how could you say if it's Sivanu on a minig? So that's a major discussion to Rishonim, whether you can say if it's Sivanu on a minig. And nevertheless, anyway, even if you hold you don't, perhaps Yom Tov Sheini is different. Because Yom Tov Sheini, we don't want to mezalzel Yom Tov Sheini by not making a bracha. So therefore, even though maybe inherently it's not a mitzvah per se, we're making the bracha out not to mezalzel Yom Tov Sheini. So either way, that's the machlokes Rabbeinu Tam and the Ran, whether Yom Tov Sheini has a din of a minig like the Rabbeinu Tam says, or like the Ran says, has a din of a Gzeira D'Rabbanan. And so my nafkamina on whether Yom Tov Sheini is a Takana D'Rabbanan or a minig. So we know there's halacha, and in fact we're coming up in a couple of weeks. Isha kisazriya v'yolda zacha v'timash shivasham. There's halacha that we know we have a mila on the 8th day. And the Gemara learns that v'yom afil b'Shabbos. We do a bris mila during the day, even on Shabbos, even on Yom Kippur, any day. However, that's only a mila bezmana. That's only a mila in its appropriate time. But a mila shelo bezmana, so we can't do on Shabbos, we can't do on Yom Tov. What about Yom Tov Sheini? Can you do a bris mila on Yom Tov Sheini? A bris mila shelo bezmana on Yom Tov Sheini. So the Rambam seems to say yes, you can, and the Rosh Rabbeinu Asher says no, you can't do a bris on Yom Tov Sheini. So what's in the Kudas HaMachlokas? Well, first of all, Shulchan Aruch, they seem to go with the opinion of the Rosh, and the Shach in Yeridea goes with the opinion of the Rambam. So it's a Machlokas HaPoskim, how we paskin on Yom Tov Sheini. Perhaps maybe there's a sex feka, it could be a difference, or a suffix mila bizmana, maybe we'll make a distinction. But the Rambam's opinion is you can do a mila on Yom Tov Sheini, a mila shelo bizmana on Yom Tov Sheini, and the rest is, and what's in the Kudas HaMachlokas? Perhaps it's this issue, that if you hold the Yom Tov Sheini is only a minhag, so mila is a din daraisa, so you don't suspend a mitzvah in a Torah out the minhag. But if you hold that Yom Tov Sheini is a Takana D'Rabbanan, we know the Gemara in Yevamos tells us Yesh koach b'yad chachamim la'akor dvar Torah b'shevet al tas. So we know no shofar on Shabbos, no lulav. So perhaps if it's a Takana D'Rabbanan, the chachamim do have the power to uproot a mitzvah in a Torah by telling you not to do it. So that could be the sheet of the Rosh. But either way, it's a machlokas, the Rambam and the Rosh, whether a mila shelo bizmana can be done on Yom Tov Sheini. And that's why that's the whole issue of a C-section baby, that a C-section baby is a suffix, whether it's day 1 or day 8. So therefore, we don't do a mila, we don't do a C-section baby day 8 on Shabbos. We normally do a day 8, because you can't go wrong. If it's day 1, so day 8 works. But if it's day 8, day 1 doesn't work, so always wait to day 8. But we can't do day 8 on Shabbos because it's a suffix mila bizmana. So that, so whether you can do a C-section on Yom Tov Sheini, so a suffix mila bizmana, perhaps that's a different issue. But either way, that's perhaps the issue between the Rambam and the Rosh, or whether you could do a mila shelo bizmana on Yom Tov Sheini. That depends. If it's a Takana D'Rabbanan, so then there's what to talk about. Yesh choach b'yad chachamim. If it's only a minute, so then we wouldn't postpone a mitzvah in our Torah based on a minute. Another nafkamina, which is very prevalent today, we live in the world of travel, and the issue is, what about if someone from Chutz La'aretz goes to Eretz Yisrael for Yom Tov? So we know in Eretz Yisrael they keep 1 day, people who live in Eretz Yisrael. What about if you're visiting Eretz Yisrael, do you keep 1 day or 2? So we know that's a major discussion in the poskim. The Mishnah Brura notes that the majority of the Achronim seem to side with Yom Tov Sheini, and that's the opinion of Yosef Karo as well. There's a minority view, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, as we'll see the Chacham Tzvi, that you should observe 1 day. So perhaps this issue on whether a Ben Chutz La'aretz who goes to Eretz Yisrael for Yantiv should keep 1 day or 2 should be dependent on this issue. If Yom Tov Sheini is a Gzeira, is a Takana D'Rabbanan, it would make sense that it's location based. That those people, who's it for? The people living in Chutz La'aretz should keep Yom Tov Sheini. But if you go to Eretz Yisrael, it wouldn't make sense that they make a Takana D'Rabbanan that you'd keep Yom Tov Sheini in Eretz Yisrael. However, if Yom Tov Sheini is based on a minhag, so it's not based on location, but as the Gemara tells us in Psachim, the Mishnah Psachim, on Daf Nun on 50a, is that you follow the minhag HaMakam, and therefore minhag of the Makam where you come from, and as you take the chumras of both, you follow the minhag of where you come from, and therefore you'd have to keep Yom Tov Sheini. Again, that's the majority view. The Chacham Tzvi makes a very cogent argument to keep 1 day. That he says it's true normally that we take the chumras of our minhag in, but that's only when it's something which applies all over. But to take the minhag of Yom Tov Sheini, which doesn't apply in Israel, he says that's a little more difficult. And in fact, that's the opinion of Rav Chaim and perhaps of the Rav, that really they held Eikar Adin like the Chacham Tzvi. They felt the logic of the Chacham Tzvi was sound. Nevertheless, they didn't want to go against the majority of the poskim who all say to keep 2 days. So, and Rav Tuchinski thinks that could have been Rav Yosef Salan sheet as well. So they keep what we call today a day and a half. That takes the chumras of both days. Maybe you daven a weekday, Shemona Esrei after Yantiv, you put on tefillin. But either way, so perhaps this issue of whether a Ben Eretz Yisrael, a Ben Chutz La'aretz who goes to Eretz Yisrael and is there for Yantiv, so if it's a Takana D'Rabbanan, so then it would seem to be only based on location. It would make sense to make a Takana D'Rabbanan if you're in Eretz Yisrael to keep 2 days. However, it's based on minhags. It wouldn't be based on location. It would be based on the gavra, on the individual. And like all minhagim, as the Gemara Psachim tells us, you go by the place where you reside. And therefore, since all places in Chutz La'aretz except the minhag of Yom Tov Sheini, so therefore you also observe Yom Tov Sheini in Eretz Yisrael. So to summarize, we have the Gemara in Beya, which on Daf Dalo, which talks about the institution of Yom Tov Sheini, its original institution, and now Bisman Hazeh, even though we have the calendar, the Machlokas Rav and Ravasi. Rav holds it's 2 distinct days, and Ravasi holds it's 1 long day. The Nafkamina would be Havdalah. If you hold 2 distinct days, you should make a Havdalah. If you hold it's 1 Yom HaRichta, you wouldn't make Havdalah. We don't make Havdalah. Yeah, we pass in 2 days. That's to avoid Zilza Yom Tov Sheini. And as we pointed out to Balamur, in a similar context, not to avoid Zilza to Yom Tov Shavuos, we don't want to count 2 days of Sfira. And we said this issue, whether you keep 2 distinct days or 1 long day, that could be whether, if it's a Takana D'Rabbanan, or whether it's a minhag Ravasi who holds as 1 day, so maybe that was a Takana D'Rabbanan to view these 2 days as 1. And Rav holds it's a minhag, and therefore we view them as 2 independent days. And this seems to be as well Machlokes Rabbeinu Tam and the Ran on whether Yom Tov Sheini is a minhag or a Takana D'Rabbanan. Rabbeinu Tam says it's a minhag, and the Ran says it's a Zakana Drabanan. That's the Ran's Kasha on Rabbi Tam. How can we make a bracha on Yom Tov Sheini? We went into the whole discussion. We know we make brachas on mitzvahs daraisa. We even make brachas on mitzvahs drabanan. When you make brachas on a minhag, that seems to be a machlokas rishonim and a machlokas Machaber and Raman, and to which cases they apply as well. So after all said and done, so my nafkamina, whether it's a minhag or a takana drabanan. So we said perhaps a nafkamina would be that's the machlokas to Rambam and Rush on a milo shalom bizmana. Could you do on Yom Tov Sheini? The Rambam says yes, so perhaps you don't suspend a mitzvah and a Torah out to minhag, but the Rush holds it's a takana d'rabbanan, therefore yesh kolach b'yachacham l'akor dvar Torah b'shei. And perhaps that's the major issue today, whether someone in Chutzlar goes there to Yisrael for Yom Tov. Do you keep 2 days like the majority opinion, or do you keep 1 day like the Chacham Tzvi and the Shulchan Harav? So if it's a takana d'rabbanan, so then maybe you could argue it's location based. So if it's location based, so therefore you wouldn't keep 2 days in Eretz Yisrael. But if it's a minhag, I know as the Gemara tells us in Psachim 58, you take your minhagim with you, and therefore perhaps you'd have to keep as well, even in Eretz Yisrael, a second day. You'd have to keep Yom Tov Sheini even in Eretz Yisrael.